Sweet. Hey, everybody. I'm here today with Chris Koski. Many of you got to meet Chris over the last couple episodes that we've had. One got posted audio on iTunes, and the second one is on its way, but you certainly could see the video. This is a pickup from that last piece. So, Chris, thanks for having us here on a Sunday during some big days in Wisconsin and, maybe some other states, something that goes on Sunday afternoons that we have better things to do now.
Yep.
So thanks for being here with us today.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me again. Quick kind of a segue from the last session to this session. I just had to edit and audit my statements because I was talked about a lot of science, and you don't always get it right, exactly right when you're just kind of going off the cuff like that. But the worst gaffe that I made, which I just have to correct, is at one point I was just breezing through and I said the population of the planet is currently 3.5 billion people. The planet is 4.5 billion years old. Of course, that's not true. I don't know what I was thinking. Maybe the population of the United States is 330 million right now. Anyhow, current population of Earth is 7.8 billion people. Many scientists agree that around 10 billion people would be the ultimate carrying capacity of the planet, where it wouldn't really matter what you did with technology. At the point of 10 billion people, we just start to crawl all over each other, and you get sicker faster is what it really tends to. There's no space for the individual to live. So anyway, with that said, nothing's more important to me than scientific integrity. And so there's me just correcting my 8 billion people on this wonderful planet of ours.
Well, and that's cool. When you're dealing with numbers, it happens all the time. So, hey, I'm glad you're a man of your word and integrity, and that's what we can count on. So that happens. No big deal. So we want to talk about energy today. And where do you want to pick up from where you didn't necessarily get a chance to tidy up last time?
Right. So this is funny. I listened to it myself and I was like, did that really? I gave you all of that information last time about the planet and its systems. We talked about global warming. Is it real? Why is it happening? Does it happen naturally? And of course it does. Now, I had to say that all just to begin this conversation, which is the chief complaint of global warming is, what are you going to do about it? And if humans want to make a difference in the global warming regime, then the main call is for us to stop burning fossil fuels. Okay, understood. And the scientific community believes that through innovation and technological advancement, we can cure many of the natural negative phenomenons that are going to be trouble for us. And so the first thing they say is, well, stop burning fossil fuels. Why doesn't, if everybody just had an electric car, okay, let's just start there. And because it's so valid, if it worked, if it was a silver bullet, I would tell you it's a silver bullet right now. But alas, here's the problem. All of these technologies, even wind turbines, modern wind turbines, electric vehicles, we've got proton exchange membrane vehicles, which is awesome. And I will talk about those. We've got magnetic levitation trains. We have many other options. We've got clean natural gas burning vehicles. Many of the buses burn clean natural gas, liquefied natural gas. Okay, no matter what, there's some kind of an Achilles heel to every single one of these technologies. So I think for starters, what I'd like to do is tell you about our current habit. Our current habit is to drive an internal combustion motor that runs on either gasoline or else diesel. That's what almost everybody in the whole world is doing. The way we generate electricity. Okay, let's talk about your home. And when you turn on the light switch, how come the lights come on? When you turn up the thermostat, why does it get warmer? Of course, we all know what air conditioning does. It cools the air, but at what cost? And it runs on electricity, right? Okay, so the historical generation of electricity in the world, as we know it today, has been burning coal. We've got coal-fired power plants. We've got natural 12-inch, 18-inch natural gas pipelines pumping, gaseous natural gas into the burn chamber. We've got diesel burning power plants. Some power plants, actually, there's one in in Nevada, Carson City, Nevada, runs their power plant on trash. It's at the municipal dump. They take rubber tires, plastic trash. They actually burn the trash, and it goes through a reburner where it gets it up to like 1800 degrees Celsius or something. So even the exhaust isn't nasty. You know, it's not just black tire smoke. It's actually quite clean. Nonetheless, all of those are fossil fuel-based fuels. Coal is carbon. Diesel is carbon. Gasoline is carbon. Natural gas, you know, is carbon. There's carbon atom in all of those fuel sources. And the one thing that remains true is as you burn it, carbon goes out the smokestack. So your question is, why do we burn it? Every single power plant in the world today, other than nuclear and hydroelectric, I'm not going to say every single because I got several examples. There's some salt tower. But by and large, the traditional power plant takes a combustible source of heat to boil water. That water gets superheated. It's not just 212, it's like 1,000 degrees. It gets injected. There's only one way out of the burn chamber for that hot gas, and that is through a turbine as that superheated, super pressurized waste heat leaves it. Okay, I'm getting it slightly wrong. The burn is to make hot water. Okay, so you're boiling water with it, but it's not normal boiling water. It's super high temperature and has super high pressure. So the steam, as it exits, only has one place to go, and that's through a pipeline that is connected to a turbine. And as that steam leaves after it got lit on fire and boiled, it has to leave through a turbine, and that turbine spins it like, I don't know, some ungodly, they've got to be as perfect as a jet motor. Anyway, that turbine spins, and with that kinetic energy of the spinning turbine, therefore spinning a generator or an alternator, a glorified alternator that's in your car. All right, so you take heat, you boil water, you blow the steam through a turbine, the turbine spins, and then you've got a secondary generator that is connected to the spin of the turbine. So it's two things spinning with a belt. All right, that's how we make electricity. That's the same almost anywhere in the world. The other traditional sources of electricity, I really want to pay homage and give kudos to the people, the Army Corps of Engineers, the people who really focused on hydroelectric power generation back at the turn of the century. I want to say that there is almost no, it's amazing. Nature is so cool. The hydrologic cycle, it takes the water from the ocean that gets evaporated. It goes up into the clouds. It comes up over the hillside. It falls in the form of rain onto the hillside. It goes into a river. That river flows downhill. That's what nature does. What the engineers take, and all these river systems in the United States, there's currently nowhere left to put a new dam. We have mapped out every single river system, and as soon as there's enough, a point at which enough water comes to a confluence to make a temporary base level, which is called a reservoir, and at the end of that reservoir, the ones in Oregon, they're like 300 feet deep. The dams are like 300 feet tall. The water is this tall, and way down here, 300, 400 feet below, the water comes squirting out, and the river just dropped 400 feet, 300 feet. And that head of pressure makes that turbine spin, all right? So it's still a spinning turbine, and it's still generating electricity. The actual alternator is right on the head of that water turbine. And water is very dense, very powerful. Hydraulics are an incredible force of nature. So that is creating electricity without lighting carbon on fire at all. And I think that's pretty cool, but we're tapped out. There's no river system left to put more dams in, or we would, you know. China is doing that right now as we speak. So the other one, we'll move on to fission reactors. We've got good old nuclear power. It's relatively clean, in my opinion. In fact, it's perfectly clean, in my opinion. There's some yuck from the mining process that isn't good. There's some yuck from the refinement process that is definitely not good. And then there's radioactive waste, which is, I don't know, a billion-year problem. And currently, back to Nevada again, we're just burying that nuclear waste at the Yucca Mountain repository where it will sit there. It's not on a fault zone. It's underground deep. It'll just sit there for hundreds of millions of years, I guess. And so there's a trouble. There was actually talk about building an elevator to space. I think that still will happen. And you could actually once you get it out of the atmosphere, you could actually slingshot it into space in just a random direction aimed at nobody. That's pretty out there, but it would work. The question is, you can't just put nuclear waste on a rocket, because once you light that rocket, well, sometimes they blow up. And so we're not going to do that. You have to get it safely out of the atmosphere and away from gravity. And then once it's out there, it could go away. And then nuclear would solve the problem. We've got plenty of uranium ore in the world to deal with this problem for some number of centuries.
And now you're saying, quick question, you're saying uranium ore would be the waste neutralizer for radioactive material.
The nuclear material comes from uranium ore primarily. We're also enriching plutonium. It's a little bit of a different process, but U-234 comes out, if I'm not mistaken. U-234 is yellow cake uranium after some minor refinement. And then we upcycle it into U-235. That is weapons grade uranium.
Okay.
Half of our nuclear bombs are built out of weapons grade uranium 235. Half of them are built out of plutonium 236. It's kind of, you come at it from both directions during the refinement process. The stuff for the power plants is primarily uranium based. Now, uranium 235 is super hot. That's kill you, kill you dead. No contact with this stuff, and it lasts for such a long time. So the fuel source, even when it's depleted in terms of its radioactive ability to drive a generator or make the steam hot, the waste is still a major problem, just a major problem. So fission reactors are not the silver bullet. There's something called fusion reaction, and everybody is familiar with the sun. The sun is a fusion reactor. It will eventually someday, in billions or hundreds of billions of years, exhaust itself, putting an end to the universe as we know it. But it has to do with helium, and it has to do with what the sun is doing right now is, with no input cost, it is hurling a whole bunch of energy outward. And so it's fusing instead of fissioning, splitting. And it would be great if we could figure that out through engineering to make a perpetual fusion reaction. If we did that, and that's part of what they're working on at like CERN and the Large Hadron Colliders, and they're exploring molecules. One of the great goals is to find fusion reaction. If we found that, we're talking silver bullet quality power generation. But it's not here yet. We just can't figure it out. So until then, nuclear isn't a safe alternative. And even then, nuclear power plants and earthquakes don't get along. As we know, Fukushima, tsunamis, and building the nuclear power plant on the ocean surface where waves can actually decimate the containment structures for this stuff. These are like, my God, this is bad. Okay, not a silver bullet. And there's no more hydroelectric. Okay, so everybody starts saying, there's enough power coming, there's enough energy coming down from space in the form of light, which is a photon, like we discussed before, to strike a photovoltaic cell where a fancy little reaction happens in the photovoltaic cell and outspits electrons. And you're actually taking light energy, they smack the face of this fancy thing. We all know what a solar panel looks like. And out comes electrons. Okay, that's fine, that's cool. It's not an energy dense. You would have to take the entire desert of the United States and populate it with photovoltaic cells to run not even the United States worth of energy demand. And which is fine. What's going on in the desert anyway, if you're not going to kill the rabbits and hares and turtles and lizards and all that stuff? Let's just say we could do it ecologically, healthfully. you would still have to build this massive apparatus of generation structures called photovoltaic cells. There's the wind turbine. Everybody knows these. They're the big white wind turbines. Most commonly, it says Vestas on the side. There are many brands now, and they're large. They're like 3 megawatt generators now. But the trouble is, up in the nacelle, which is that school bus size thing behind the big 3 props, up there is where the generator is at, and it's much like a car generator, except for, probably weighs 20,000 pounds or something like that. And they've shrunk down that thing. They've got special magnets in it. They've got special coiling in it. All of these things, through technology, we've been able to develop and refine the quality of energy generation. Okay. There are some other ones, photovoltaic wind energy. There's the proton exchange membrane. This is one of the most exciting things I can talk about as a scientist. Proton exchange is pretty crazy. It takes water, which we have plenty of, whether it's dirty or clean. We're not short on water on this planet, luckily. Clean water, we discussed this earlier, clean water, drinkable, our aquifer systems, those are a different story, okay? But let's just say you take some dirty water, you do reverse electrolysis on it, which means basically you shock the liquid and it splits from its H2O, so the 2 H's come off and the oxygen comes off. One of them, through this side bypass thing, and the hydrogens, which are super chemistry geek stuff now, hydrogen is the first element on the periodic table. It's got one proton and 1 electron. That electron is electricity. In a sense, in a crazy sense, hydrogen is electricity if you split the proton away from the electron. All right, so when going through a proton exchange membrane, phase 1, break the water through reverse electrolysis. Phase 2, take it spits the oxygen right out the tailpipe. That's no harm to anybody. And it takes the hydrogen atom and it runs it through this membrane that actually successfully splits the electron away from the proton. The electron flows through the cathode, I think, which is the negatively charged side, and that's electric. And then the proton gets skirted around the other side of the membrane, and that's nothing. And after the electric charge is gathered off of the cathode side, they join back together into hydrogen, and they basically just make water vapor, which comes out the tailpipe.
And what is that called?
That is the mechanism.
Yes.
It's called a proton exchange membrane, or also we're calling them flow batteries right now. And we're going to come back to that word battery because that's that's probably the first most important component. The thing I wanted to talk about, I'm going to try to make that complicated stuff short. You've got your wind turbine. There's fancy technology in there. You've got your photovoltaic cell. There's fancy technology in there. You've got your proton exchange. There's fancy technology in there. You've got some other, there's biodiesel, but you're burning carbon again. What I want to say about these technologies, I keep coming back to the rare earth minerals. This is something that was very surprising to me back in my study. The rare earth mineral is this very special group of atoms on the periodic table. It's seen in the second to the last row. That's kind of a blowout. The second to the last row, there's 15 elements in there on the order of lanthanum, cerium, praseodymium. I'm not going to read them all to you because I know you don't care. But these 15 elements have really strange and wonderful electronic properties. I did a big paper on this one time. You find that in your LCD screen, the only reason that you can see the color red, or the color red can be represented, is because they pass electricity through one of these lanthanide atoms, and its offshoot is this red byproduct. So it's involved. These elements are involved in every single thing that you hold in your hand, from your smartphone to your computer to your TV to the computers that run your cars to the computers that run our electricity generation stations. It all has to do with computing, and computing is completely reliant on the rare earth minerals. That is the punchline. Back to geology and rare earth minerals, China holds the known ore in the world. China holds 95% of the mass. And of the 15 elements, China has large constituencies in their ore of all 15 of them. The 5% that's in the rest of the world, we have some pretty good deposits in Northern California, but there's only the first 8 of 15 elements. We just cannot mine, extract, purify, and use 7 of the elements because they don't happen geologically, geographically speaking, in our world as we know it. We have to go ask China, hey, we need some ytterbium and some lutetium. And they're like, well, geez, what do you want that for? And we're like, we're going to make a wind turbine. And they're going to say, no, you're not. You're making weapons. You're making space satellites. Like that's the only reason we use that stuff. They know just as well as we do what we need it for. And there will come a point where they stop playing nice and just giving it to us. Why would they be giving us the stuff that we need in the computers to run our war satellites and our intercontinental ballistic missile submarines or boomers? Eventually they're going to say, no, we know you need it to fight us, and we're not giving it to you because we want to win. And that's future, but it's as real as anything could be. So,
and we're talking geologically. They just have
correct. Yeah, that gigantic landmass that is their country, just in terms of where do I go to mine this stuff so I can make cool things that's going to solve the problems of humanity. And when the Earth is most comfortable at a population of 5 billion, how are we going to make the Earth work with a population of 10 billion? And through all science and physics, what it really comes down to are these 15 elements that we know of so far. That is the when they say technology will solve all of our problems and humanity and civilization will be able to continue on that upward growth trajectory because science will come along and open the doors that were closed. And that's giving a big old pat on the back to the human being and the human brain and the incredible ability that we have to dissect a problem, work a solution, and come to a conclusion that really saves our butts from a thing that we were getting into. They're called rare earth for a reason. Even if China didn't have them, or let's just say they were so widespread geologically over the geography of the world that we could always get what we needed. There's still only a certain amount of it. There's not a large amount of this substance on the earth, which leads us to what we talked about very briefly last time, which is in 40 years, 50 years from now, we will be mining garbage dumps for the recollection of old TVs, old computers, old electronics. We will be extracting these rare earth minerals back out of the circuit boards of these things because that's how valuable they are. That's how finite they are. And we're not going to get along without them at all. So thank you for listening to all of that spiel. I wanted you to know that they're scarce in their geography. They're scarce in their constituency of all the rocks on the earth. Not very many of them contain these 15 elements. They are scarce in their ability to be mined by tons per year and refined and created the products that we need them to be. And every single thing that we are doing today requires them. I'll give you examples once again. Wind turbine that sits up there and spins so majestically, right? I used to live in Washington State, and there are, on the whole Columbia River Gorge, it makes me proud to be an American sometimes, to look at these fields of silent spinning wind generators that create enough power for like 70,000 homes in Seattle when they're spinning. Two problems. Sometimes the wind doesn't blow, and sometimes the wind blows at the wrong time. We're going to broach the topic of batteries now. When you put electrons into the power grid, they have to have an immediate place to go. You need an air conditioner turned on at the other end that's going to burn up. The power grid is not a battery. Electron in, electron out, right? So there's no way to store power once it's made. And sometimes the power can't be made when you need it. And furthermore, the power was made from a really fancy generator up in the nacelle of that wind turbine that is totally laden and dependent on rare earth minerals. Okay, so bummer. We need scarce stuff, and then it's still so imperfect. So then the scientists say, okay, let's augment the wind turbine energy that's created sporadically with hydroelectric. That is, you can store the water and release it at will, and you can create a, as needed source of energy. That's great, but eventually the reservoir fills up, and they have to actually start. Or sometimes in a drought year, the reservoir will completely go down, and you have to eventually stop dumping water, or you kill all the fish. They'll be sitting there flopping in the mud. So that's no silver bullet either. And then the third one is, okay, let's make photovoltaics out in the desert. We'll make fields of them. Well, photovoltaic apparatuses are constantly improving and renewing, which is a good thing. However, they are so hungry for these rare earth minerals that to create them, you have to have this massive input of rare earth minerals. And you get into supply and demand issues where you can't even create the PVs that you want to put out in the desert at such a scale that by the time you did mine the materials to make them, there would be a new, more efficient PV that you should have replaced it with before you ever even got it into position. So that's got a struggle of its own as well. And they say, well, you got to put a smattering of all of it. You got to have hydro, you got to have wind, you got to have nuclear, you got to have PV, and that is the state of energy generation today. You're taking everything, and when in doubt, you just light up the diesel and you heat the water and you spin the turbine, and that's how you get through peak demand, which is the sunny day, 100 degrees out. Everybody's going to run all the air conditioners. So I would just, as this weird segue, during off-peak hours in the cool of the evening, they actually built Alcoa, aluminum producing co-op of America or something like that. I can't remember what it stands for, but it's a major aluminum producer in Washington State. I used to see these big semis with a 3,000 pound ingot of silver aluminum cruising down the road, and you're just like, my God, that's incredible. It's this big brick of aluminum. Well, what they're really doing to create aluminum, it's another process of shocking. And they take off-peak electricity that's coming from the wind turbines or coming from the hydroelectric dams. And when nobody's using electricity, because you can't store it, they're just using that electricity in real time at night to shock this stuff and make aluminum out of aluminum bauxite ore. So that's kind of cool. I mean, we, as thinkers, we have thought of everything I can imagine, every way I can imagine to do it right. And I want to give us some credit, because I hear so much about how we beat ourselves up for just, we're so hard on ourselves. And I just want to say that we've done so many things right. And we're starting to get into an end game here where no matter how hard we try, we may not come up with a solution that is really going to make it all okay. So with that, that's the generation of electricity. I want to then move on to the transmission. Here's a kick in the pants. Most of the electricity, in fact, all of the electricity that we send down the big lines that you see, I mean, they're on those big steel four-legged deals. They go way up high, and they have big lines, silver lines in triplicate like that. That's all alternating current energy. Big, like, you know, I've worked around flying big pieces with cranes in and stuff, sitting next to these power lines. And there's so much electricity going through it that it could actually arc and hit the boom of the crane if you get too close. Can't get closer than 100 feet, 150 feet. So anyway, it's sending these electrons down that line, but remember, it's one electron in back at the hydroelectric plant, and it's got to be one electron out somewhere far away. So out on the Pacific Northwest, we have all of these rivers flowing down hills to spin turbines at the big dams. Seattle, Portland, they're not big cities, not like the metropolis of LA. So LA constantly needs power. So we are constantly sending them power from our what we're generating. We generate too much up there, and there's not nearly enough down there. So it's 2,000 miles. The trouble is, every 1,000 miles, as you go down those big electrons in, after 1,000 miles, you've burned 30 out of the 100 electrons just pushing it down the line. There's resistance in the line. And then you got a boost. There's called a booster station, where it amplifies the power, remodulates it, makes it all pretty again, and it flows down the line for another 1,000 miles. But once it gets there again, you have to put another 30% of the energy in. The punchline is, to send it 2,000 miles, it cost you 30% plus 30%. You spent 60% waste energy to push the electrons down the line to LA, that only 40% of the electrons arrive in LA. So even we all know the many problems that are involved with generation of power, but what about the transmission of power? So there are some other fascinating technologies going on. What we really want to do is find a drag-free line to push this electron down. You wouldn't even have to push it. It just kind of like bink, and it goes perpetually, right? Well, the only way to do that refining is with superconductors. Once again, I want to say right off the bat, any kind of superconducting notion has to do also with rare earth, all right? The best way to superconduct is you have to cool something. Let's say we make a pipeline. And we run it down the ground, you know, under the ground, as safe as we can. It's a pipeline, and it's full of liquid hydrogen that you can cool to what's called absolute zero, or negative 273 degrees Celsius, which is called 0 Kelvin. And negative 273 Celsius is some crazy number like negative 900, negative 700 Fahrenheit. I don't know why I'm telling you guys this. It doesn't matter. If you get to absolute zero, which is the coldest temperature that we know of anything that we can actually get, or an aluminum wire will behave differently at that extreme low temperature, and much of the resistance is gone. And so that's awesome. Okay, so you're saying there's a hope, but here's the trouble. You bury that pipeline and you send it down the most tectonically active face on the planet of the Earth. There are 5 plates, 5 continental and oceanic plates, subducting and converging and colliding. The San Andreas Fault, we all know that one. What happens when the Earth as we know it, I mean, rock will just, and it'll just fissure, like it'll just break like that. Well, their winter line, all of the hydrogen, liquid neg 273 hydrogen comes gushing out all over the place. It's an immediate stop to the flow of energy. And how do you even clean that up or repair it? There are also roadblocks there, right? Not a silver bullet. So, you know, I don't want to just be a downer and point out all of the negative components to all of these options. But I want everyone to know that when you just hear a pundit say, well, if everybody would just buy an electric car, this would all be, you know, the problem would be gone. We can't build them. We can't build enough of the electric cars. And if we did build all of these electric cars, remember they're electric and you got to plug them into the wall. And when you plug them into the wall, where did the electricity come from? And it still came from the plant that's burning coal. to make the electricity, right?
So that's an important piece, Chris, because there's a lot of theory around that. And then it segues into my next question, which when we look at this very forward and you hear different things depending on what rabbit holes we've gone down, but Tesla energy, number one, I have a question with that. Maybe you mentioned some of the what's the word? Some of the technology through these other things that was Tesla but what's being held back from us and the curiosity there.
Yeah.
But you're right. I hear this constantly with, what you should do. For example, the kind of vehicle I drive, I didn't get that vehicle for gas mileage. I got it for adventure and fun and what I like to do in my life.
Yeah.
That doesn't make sense to many people. That's arguably irresponsible.
Yeah.
And yet it's very present time, and it's very also pragmatic when you think about the big picture of what we're really trying to portray. It's kind of like complete vegetarianism and veganism and what we have to do to those croplands with all wildlife to just keep them clean for vegetation growth. So
correct. Yeah.
Again, it's this behind the scenes stuff that people don't put together as the cost of doing that business or the cost of creating that technology and running that technology and what that means to the mass.
Any about my Ford Raptor and what a scoundrel I am for driving it and how much better of a person I would be if I had an electric vehicle, I would smoke them within 5 minutes of argument. And I would argue that the environmental cost on me burning my gasoline in my Raptor is arguably several times less hurtful to the environment than the production of that one electric vehicle. Over your lifetime, you'll have at least 4, right?
Okay, time out.
It's a dirty process.
It's huge.
Yep.
So some of you cut out. You drive a Ford.
Oh, sorry. Okay. So anytime, if somebody wanted to have an argument with me about what a scoundrel I am for driving my Ford Raptor, this gasoline burning motor, I would smoke them in an argument within the first 5 minutes, because I would tell them what it took to mine the materials for that electric car that they drove, and the fact that they're still getting the electricity from the plant down the way, which I happen to know is a cogen plant that either burns coal or burns diesel fuel. So you mined a bunch of fancy stuff out of the earth to make this fancy car, and then you still rely on a belching smokestack that is hurling CO2. There's no other replacement technology currently to make electricity on that order. We're always going to need coal and gasoline or diesel to create electricity. And you built a car that has so much computer and battery. We're going to go batteries in a little bit too. Those batteries are the most filthy, environmentally toxic, long-lasting legacies that you can imagine. And the idea that that's a clean source of transportation is a complete misnomer. It's one of the most hideous forms of transportation that I've ever imagined. I'm not against it. I think we need to use them incrementally on our way to proton exchange membranes. But the batteries, the old school kind of batteries, there's lead acid, there's lithium ion, there's alkaline, there's cadmium, there's metal hydride. There's these fancy batteries that they're getting better and better. The battery in your iPhone keeps getting smaller and lighter, and it keeps lasting longer and longer. Okay, we're making a lot of headway, but they're filthy in terms, the geologically disgusting products to mine out of the ground, the byproducts that are created, and then the general sense of life, they just go to the dump. We're not even recycling them properly. So all of those problems are still true with electric cars, because you got to plug it into the wall to get the battery charged up, and then they use the batteries 500 times, and after 3 years the battery is shot and you need a new battery. Well, what do you do with that old battery? Currently there's not a great reuse recycle purpose for those old batteries. And so since you got the electricity from a coal belching, carbon belching smokestack to make your electric vehicle, I say my Raptor is actually the environmentally conscious thing to drive. And I say it's far less detrimental to us as a group that I do that. And then there's the whole thing of what do I do with it? Well, I'm actually using it bouncing around on a rough grade where we're building brand new highways with additional capacity to make traffic flow better. And so anything I do in my life with fuel is going to have a legacy net win to the group because I'm building y'all highways, you know, bigger, more, better. You got less idle time, and idle time is the greatest waste of fossil fuels of all things. Sitting on the 405 in LA idling is a horrendous mistake that we're making, but we're doing our part. So sorry to go off on my tangent about my truck, but it's not necessarily a bad thing. And if you're blessed enough to have 4 or 5 kids and this family that you have, get a Suburban so you can get them all to do the things that we're supposed to do. It's a wonderful life, and they want to play soccer and they want to go to the skate park or whatever it is that they do. So you got a gas burning vehicle, go create good humans, great humans who turn out to do things that are not of a net cost, but a net gain to society as a whole. It's called parenting. And we'll go off on that tangent some other time.
So I think in summary, that's a good point, that there's a lot of judgment. People are going to hear that and just absolutely make judgments about the responsibility that you're stating of having a gas burning vehicle. But the myth is that there is only net gain from an electric vehicle, and they're not shared with that those rare earth elements that it takes to run the computer, to formulate the battery so the battery does what it's supposed to do for so long.
Totally.
Yeah, there's brake regeneration into the power. That's a fascinating technology.
It is.
Forces transition in, however, and I don't understand how that works, but I want to know why a mountain bike can't do it yet. Okay.
I only want to say this, and the mountain bike would be cool because you burn calories, right? But it's the same as the power lines and the 1,000 miles. You can't propel a car up to 60 miles an hour and then think you're going to get all the energy back when you stop it down to 0 miles an hour. You're going to get 30%, 20%, 10% of the power back. You're never if you started with one increment of energy, you're never recovering one full increment of energy. You're going to recover some fraction of it through waste. That's neat, but that's not a silver bullet.
So, Chris, I've heard this argument too. Energy is, and this is, where I'm going with this, the basic fundamental law, right? Mm-hmm. Energy is never created or destroyed. It's only transferred. So are you saying that with that statement that we're just not able to capture and recapture it all? Not that it's not there as a one in and one out. It's that to capture the one back out, we're only catching fractions of that right now.
Yeah. Where's
awesome. The rest is going somewhere though, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I'll tell you right now. I had this amazing, this guy, he's wicked smart. He was one of my professors. He's a physics professor. Dr. Dark Matter, plug for you. But he kept going off on this. I took a course with him called Earth Resources and Their Use. And he kept talking about the issue behind all of these arguments is nobody's focusing on the intrinsic cost, the whole cost of any kind of a solution that we have. The intrinsic cost starts all the way back at the mine and the energy that it took to blow up the rock, make a mine that goes almost a mile down into the earth, put it in trucks, haul it up to the conveyor belt, get it over to the crushing place where it takes big ones and makes little ones, and then figuring out how, that took a lot of effort to get that stuff just to make a product. Let's call it steel. And I just described an iron ore mine. Okay, now you've got steel that your car. And then the cradle to grave aspect of it too. The intrinsic cost to create this final thing that you drive safely. And then the cradle to grave cost of what you made. We went in to make these batteries and we mined out a whole bunch of yucky stuff, put it together to make a battery. And now when that battery is done with our use, what are you going to do with it? It's a massive waste product and it's almost as bad as this nuclear waste that we can't figure out what to do with. So there's intrinsic cost of creating a product, and then there's a cradle to grave cost of doing such a thing in the first place. And if you had to pay for an electric vehicle with its intrinsic cost, cradle to grave cost, it would cost you $7 million, because we'd have to build a facility, a mega facility, just to deal with the breakdown and recycling of that product in the first place, right? And that's the trouble with our whole obsolescence. All of our electronics, they're only made, this computer I'm looking into right now is made to last 6 months before it's so obsolete that I can hardly function with it, because the new ones are doing things faster and everything is built upon that faster platform now. So that's called planned obsolescence. Remember how they didn't even used to make the power cord the same on cell phones? It's because they knew that that port wasn't even going to exist when you made the recycle. Plus, they were getting mad money to $35 is what they charge you, you know? Mm-hmm. So it was a scam. But the fact still remains, your white cord that charges your Apple, and yeah, it'll go from Apple product to Apple product, but they're not meant to last. Nothing in this world is meant to last. And we're supposed to, that we create is meant to last. And we're supposed to just buy one, use it for a certain amount of time until it becomes obsolete, and then buy it. The way to do it was just throw the old one in the garbage. And we'll go get that stuff again, like I said. Now we're finally starting to recycle things, just the very burgeoning tip of that notion. But we're still not up to speed, and we're still not responsibly recycling all of the technology waste that we have. And so if that can answer your question, if we really paid the intrinsic cost for the coal, for the power, because you want that light switch to turn on, right? Or you want the lights to come out. If you really paid for the intrinsic cost of that kilowatt hour for that light to burn, it would be far, far more expensive, because you'd have to talk about the long-term effect of the carbon gas that you blew up into the atmosphere. And currently, that is not in our economic system to measure things in that way. It's not part of profit or cost. There's this huge amount of environmental degradation that occurs at the cost of us all, because we all use these products. It's getting, the environmental quality would be on a downward trajectory as our quality of life is on an upward trajectory. That's just the truth about environmental engineering and the way it works. And then you add more people on top of it too. So you got more users constantly. Again, I don't want to be a big bummer, but if we can't have the conversation starting at the very beginning is, okay, you decided to have a baby. Nice. Now we got a family. That baby is going to grow up to use this much product and electricity in its lifetime. How are we coming to terms with that? And what's the correct number of babies? And how do you manage that? And I don't even go into the whole, I love babies, I love kids, and I love families. The China One policy for 50 some years, they wouldn't allow a Chinese family to have more than one child. And it was strictly enforced, and there were bad penalties, including prison. And in the Chinese culture, the male boy, the boy child, was always the one that would take care of mom and dad, and even grandma and grandpa 2 generations from now. They all live in the same house, kind of like the Latino culture, which I love. I love groups of family together, and they all pitch in and share. But with China One, what happened when baby came out and it was a little girl? They were throwing these little girls away for 50 years, whether it be just through abortion or through selling them, all kinds of, it introduced some of the most horrendous things that I think about as the intrinsic result of such a policy. The culture wants a boy. Well, what do you do with the girls? And then this is crazy, but there's good scientific peer-reviewed literature to back this up. What happens when 78% of the offspring of a country are boys? What happens 3 generations later? And the punchline is, and again, I would never be cavalier about saying something, because we're all God's children. 3 generations later, we're finding that there's no girls to date, and so boys start dating boys as a matter of puberty or design. I'm not going to get into that, all right? But your homosexuality population is growing up, and now you have a baby boom, a baby anti-boom, a baby crash, because it takes boys and girls to make biological born boys and girls to make babies. And so that one, what a roller coaster that was. And that took 50 years just to play out. And China is currently totally concerned about their population demograph. The right side, the boy side, is way fat in their graph, and the girl side is real skinny in their graph. And so they've discontinued.
You're not talking weight and body size. You're talking numbers.
Numbers, yeah. The demography. Yes, thank you for clearing that up. Oh my gosh. Yeah, I'm just there. There's something called a beehive curve. It's children on the bottom, old people on the top, males on that side, females on this side, and it graphs out a healthy population should look like a beehive. It's fat in the middle.
Balance.
Yep. 18 to 55-year-olds. That's you have most of. There are not so many older people and not so many younger people, but it maintains itself healthfully.
And economically, that tends to balance things out as well. Like we're going to experience here soon, is
right.
Our workforce has changed, and our boomers are in this position of non-generation, non-income generation.
Right. Okay. Not sure how we got on that one, but
it's okay. It had to do with rare earth, and somehow China keeps coming around. So China. This was pretty heavy. I don't know what the take home is going to be for some, but that's all right because it opens the conversation.
It's information.
And I think so. We should tidy this up based on time today and keep this one. But I'd love to get back with you on this. And two things, Chris. I'm going to ask the question. What about Tesla technology that we're not getting? That's potentially been hidden from us,
right?
For the reasons of creating, whatever, whether it be more leverage to certain corporations and driving their business and whatnot, or just postponing that evolutionary piece for whatever reason. Precisely. I don't know.
That's what it is. It's a postponing, and we touched on it last time. And I think that next time I'm going to actually, I totally need to do a little bit. If I spent 1 hour and pulled out just a handful, some talking points of individual Tesla theories, what they are, what they would do, and why they're not doing it. That would be a very fascinating conversation. But this man was talking about being able to beam energy, not even sending it through a line, right? Mm-hmm. This man was talking about being able to take an item, let's say a black top hat, make it disappear from one location and reappear in another location.
So now we're talking time travel.
Yeah. And if we were able to tap into some of these technologies, I'll buy it. For the first time in the conversation, I'll buy it. We're getting closer to a silver bullet, right? Then that's where the hope is. The hope is in fusion reactors, not fission reactors. The hope is in some technology that comes out intrinsically, it's not that dirty, and its benefit is 10 million times better than its one-to-one counterpart under the current regime, right? Under the current paradigm. So this would be a paradigm shift. And that would be the title of the next one, would be Paradigm Shift. How do we get from here, given that there's no silver bullet that we know of? Not at all. I've poked a hole in every single one of the technologies, and I can tell you why exactly they won't just solve all the problems. There's no paradigm shift available in the current technology. There's got to be something else. And then in terms of what happened to the technology and why is it being suppressed, I can only say this, and I touched on it last time. These people who developed the Industrial Revolution, as we know, all of those old robber barons, everybody's familiar with their names. I'm not going to beat them up. I'm not going to say their names. I'm just going to say, please give me the leeway to just use an example. Phillips 66, Conoco, Chevron, whatever the number, whatever the name is, right? all of those investment funds bought into fossil fuels way early on, and they developed a trillions-dollar industry of extraction, refinement, transmission to end user, right? The gas station and the vehicle that I pull up to it in. I gotta go to the gas station. I need what they sell.
Can I stop 1 second? So people, what I'm hearing there is, they made investments into the creation, production, refinement, and selling of it. Therefore, go ahead. Is that what I just heard?
That's exactly what you just heard. They are going to recoup their maximum gain. They're not going to start at some point and say, we'd lose money on it, but if we got on this train, we could make money on that new train. They're gonna exhaust this method by suppression of the new method until they've monetarily recouped every last dime that they can through the selfishness of the human soul. And then they are the ones who are purchasing the new technologies, just so you know. It takes mega dollars to purchase and develop these new technologies. They'll get on the next train and own it too. That's my take on it. I can't name a name. I can't say for sure, but everything that I learned from any professor I ever studied under and what I see anecdotally in the world I live in is that is the truth. They're not going to give up dollars. So some would say get rid of currency, but that just sounds like war.
Well, the whole thing that's really cool here, I lost my spot here, is that as you go through this and just kind of give us the science side behind it. I mean, I'm learning a ton just sitting here listening and trying to see that big picture as I step back 10,000, maybe 25,000 foot view is in the grand scheme of things. We've had options. There's been great scientific minds and research ahead of us, and there's the intrinsic costs with it. There's the cradle to grave, like you stated. There's this bigger picture that doesn't get included, and many times the media controls what we're exposed to, as we both know. And so there's this pattern of, nope, we're going to talk about this, and who invests into the media? These same corporations to then disseminate
same folks.
Same folks. So some don't want to believe that that's kind of how the big system works, and yet in reality,
you got to control the narrative to control the mindset. To get the narrative has to create the mindset that allows you to your own beneficial end. And if it was me, I would make sure that you had a narrative to brainwash you into believing that there was no other good choice for you except for to buy my stuff.
My stuff, right?
Yeah,
It's a good hit. And that is just basic business. And that doesn't mean all business and capitalism is bad. But when you look at the relationship of those major players, the select few in our, in our, not only our country, the world, geographically speaking, is, you can say central banks and whatever, the elite, that in and of itself driving the economic engine. And that's what's fascinating. And people we get to see it on the surface, and we get to hear the rant about superficial information as to why that's just is, when really that's not even close to what is.
Yeah. I would encourage everybody to look up a man called Milton Friedman. He is one of the preeminent economists of all time. He's an American man. He worked out of Chicago, their economic sort of society. They called them the Chicago Boys. There's about a 14-hour Milton Friedman presentation from the mid-'80s available on YouTube. And without saying I espouse and agree with every single notion that he has, he certainly talks about all of the things about today's economy and today's society that it's getting better for everybody, and everybody has a better quality of life, no matter how bad and bleak this is looking at this point in history. It's better than it was 100 years ago by far. There is less poverty per capita. There is more protein consumption per person. There is a better quality of life. Like, I'm warm right now and not shivering under a grass roof. And so all of these things, it's the kind of a thing you need to start in certain places. If you don't like the economy and you don't like capitalism, then study it, first of all. Right now, go do that. And there's the other guy. There's the socialist guy who had a volumes of thought that he put into the notion. And that's sort of Milton, and this guy went back and forth. Keynes. I think his name was Keynes. Keynesian economics. So I just gave you two. What is it?
I'm familiar with Keynesian economics.
Okay.
What's his name? It'll come to me. Mike Maloney talks about it from Gold, Silver.
Yeah. Yes. Okay. I'm not putting my vote in for Keynes or Friedman, but I sure do read their stuff. You have to come to terms with the fact that you were born into a society, and no matter how much you hate it for whatever reason, you going and living in the jungle and seeing nobody and going back to full-on sticks and stones is not going to improve your quality of life, your tribe that you can create out there, or the quality of life for your offspring. You can't beat it. We are going in the right direction if you just talk about mortality and comfort while you're not dead.
It's interesting. There's so much pushback on this. This is crazy.
I know. That stuff's hard to even talk about. It just gets lit on fire right away, you know?
Yeah. So let's figure out a time when we can reconnect. I want to be respectful of your time, our listeners. And that said, how would you like to wrap up from today's summarize?
Okay. I would just like to tell you all that the work is being done, and there are scientists who are good and not bad. And we are really searching to solve some midstream issues like energy transmission. If we could just do one thing, and that would be eliminate some of the waste from this process, that would be massive. We could almost solve the whole problem. In terms of greenhouse emissions leading to global warming, if we just went for the old, let's make it efficient, gain efficiency, recover waste. If we could do that in this paradigm under this group of stuff we got, like coal, natural gas, proton exchange, electric cars, photovoltaic, if we could just recover some of the waste through science, we'd be doing pretty good. All right. And then there's this whole nother notion of a paradigm shift, a true paradigm shift, where we're just talking about different sources of energy, like free source energy that just doesn't end.
So maybe we could talk about that next time.
Yep. So it's not a dead end street, and we're doing our best. There are other technologies on the horizon, and I'm excited for them. In your lifetime, you will most likely just see the improvement of these technologies that we're working with. But if we can do this, we can balance this conversation about are humans causing global warming just by taking the waste out of the system as we know it. So I don't want anybody to be bummed out by all the things I said. I want them to know about them as truths, and I hope it would inspire somebody to go spend 10 years in college and be the next, go do what it takes. Help us out here. We need you. And science is riveting. It's fascinating. It's the most fun I've ever had inside the brain I have. And so I just want to offer all of this information to you guys, hopefully to just spur your interest and make you go out there and bite onto it. Go get some of your own.
You're definitely not charged and excited about what you do in science, Chris.
Right.
So. Awesome. Yeah. I love it. So I'm looking forward to our next powwow, and we can touch on a couple things. You also mentioned something, and I'm just going to give a segue here in terms of maybe a preface as to what we want to talk about. Yeah. And that is you in what you do and why and how road recycling and or efficiency with creation of highways that I've noticed watching construction. Mm-hmm. I'm pretty fascinated the evolution as well and how much more efficient it's got. So you can speak to how that industry has changed and where you see gains there that are just like profound that maybe the end user doesn't even consider, that isn't even aware of.
You would never know, but 30 years ago, we used to take stone from a quarry, blow it up, put it in a truck, drive it out to my grade, take all of the old concrete and asphalt, put it in that truck, bring it back to the quarry, and dump it. You make a hole and then you fill a hole. What we're doing now is I'm taking last year's stone, last highway's stone, I'm breaking the concrete in my crusher, and it's no longer concrete, the driving surface. I still have to use virgin concrete, but I take the old concrete and I make my base aggregate, and my other rock constituencies of the road. We're recycling on the order of 80. Well, we recycle 100% of the old product. It's gravel as well as it's hardtop, asphalt and concrete. It's awesome. And that's only 30 years old, man.
Cool. That's really cool stuff.
It happens right in a line. It's called the flop. I'll explain it, but I'll need a whiteboard.
Yeah, that's cool. Well, we'll look forward to that one. So thanks for your time again today. And until next time, peace, brother.
Thank you so much, Wade, for the opportunity. Appreciate it.
Bet. Enjoyed it.
Bye, guys.